And we're live. G'day. Welcome to the realm, property realm, that is. I'm Scotty North, and I've got all the realmers here today. Karen, Remo, and Co. G'day, guys. How you going?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Good. Good. All right, we got some feedback coming from someone who's not using headphones there, so we'll have to manage that as we go. All right, so it is, what do we got? We are Tuesday lunchtime in Australia, so that means it's the start of the work week, and it leaves Monday to catch up with friends or go to your local state CFMEU office and throw spitwads at the windows if you're in Melbourne, that is, because the tradies have nothing else to do because they're shut down at the moment, the poor buggers. And that's all thanks to our government overlords. And that actually ties very well into today's topic, which is when is the right time to buy property? Because obviously having tradies on hand to build a house would be handy, but unfortunately that's not available in some areas at the moment. So what areas is that available and how does that work for you? And that's what we're talking about today. And as we normally talk about things in our office or on our chat programs and what have you, we figured that we'd just come and chat in front of you because, we're totally transparent. You might as well hear what we're thinking and gnashing out as we go. And in fact, on our weekend email, this was the topic of the email, which coincidentally is the same as the topic of the show. Amazing. And that is, when is the right time to buy? And we touched a little bit on that on Saturday, and that was, we were definitely going to break that down into two areas. One is, are we talking about for your own home and for you to live in, whether it's first home, all that sort of stuff, or are we talking about for investment and other bits and pieces? So, okay, let's kick off. I know CO's always got questions. So CO, what's your thoughts on this topic, and what questions have you got from our clients and others?
Yeah, well, a question that, or maybe a situation, I should say, that we often hear from inquiries that we get from different investors. Often they're at a point where they're either looking to purchase a property for investment purposes, but not exactly sure where to go. And maybe this is a situation you're familiar with as well. There are a lot of buyers who are looking for investment purchases within their current locations, but given the current circumstances with different things happening in different states, I'd love to hear what are the trends that you'll see across the different states, let's say the main states, because of the different restrictions that we've seen since 2020.
Well, I mean, you're talking to me, you're talking to...
Yeah, let's start with you, Scotty.
Yeah, right. Well, obviously the trends are such that it's heavily dependent on what's been happening in those local areas in terms of lockdowns, other bits and pieces. But let's not delve too much into the specifics. We're still seeing a lot of people buying their own property, even in the lockdown states such as New South Wales and Victoria. Somehow there's still transactions happening, and in some places it's substantial numbers of transactions, and people are very much still buying their own property because they felt it's sort of the time and it's ready for them to do that. And so that is what we're seeing from an anecdotal perspective. From a data perspective, well, there's a whole bunch of different data about population movement and what have you, but that doesn't necessarily tie too much into when is the right time to buy. So I think there's a whole bunch of people that have thought in the past 12, 18 months that the right time to buy for them is now, and they've done so. Karen, what are you finding?
The right time to buy is when it suits you, really. If you've got the money, you can afford it, it's your timing, then buy it. If you're doing it as an investor, it's another whole realm of calculations and everything you've got to work out. But when you're doing it for yourself, it's not something you're likely to get in and out of in a year like you would as an investor. Perhaps it's something you're going to get in and stay in for a long period of time. So the changes in market and the right timing to buy kind of doesn't factor in. It's just a matter of what suits you at that time, what you can afford, and your circumstances. And if the market's high, well, just don't sell anytime soon. If it's low, well, lucky you. Really.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. And the And as Karen said, the best time to buy is when you're good and ready. And I suppose we could have a topic another day of how do you know when you're good and ready, but we're not talking about that now. It's just like when is the right time to buy. And I find that this question gets asked the most of us from two groups of people. People who are either what I call skimpers and are trying to just get into the market and don't have enough money. And they're asking that question because they want to know if they're going to effectively go and bet on black that they're going to have a win at the tables because the market's going to move up, and they're asking us for that opinion. Or the traders, the people that want to know what's going on when, and they want to time the market just simply by getting in and getting out at a higher point. So the skimpers and the traders are the ones that mostly ask those questions. The owners don't really ask those questions because, as Karen said, they're buying when they're ready and when they want to buy. And I think that's really important. What that definition is for you, well, that's totally up to you. When you want to buy your own home, it's when you're good and ready and when you're comfortable. Remo, what do you think?
Mate, my answer's simple. I think if we were in September 21st, 1989, then today's the perfect time to buy. If we could go back 37 years, that would be the perfect time, but we can't, right? So yeah, I don't know. I think I agree with both of you. It all comes down to your personal self, whether you're in a position to buy right now. The reality is if now's, a lot of people have this perception that, hey, now's the time to sell because the market's up. But if your property's doubled in the last 2 years, which a lot of properties have, and you sell today, you're buying back into a market that is still high. So as we had this conversation yesterday, Scotty, if you're buying today and you're looking to get into something slightly cheaper at a later date, then, the opportunity might be to sell now and wait 2, 3, 4 years, go through a market correction, market slow down, property comes down a bit, buy back in, score yourself a little bargain. However, there's other opportunities out there as well, just thinking out of the box where, you've got discount buying opportunities as well. You've got a lot of buyers agents out there that are finding really good deals. So yeah, it all comes down to, are you in a position to buy right now? If so, then do it. Do you wait 2 years to buy? I wouldn't. If it's any indication of, what's been happening over the last 2 years, if that's going to happen for the next 2 years, well, I probably wouldn't wait too much longer to try and get into the market if you're in a position to buy. But as you mentioned before, if you're a first home buyer, well, now is always the right time to buy if you're now in a position to buy. And I think we're seeing a lot of that at the moment. And then it comes down to where to buy and what to buy. But we'll leave that for a topic for a little bit later, I guess.
All right. So CO, let's move. Let's just say that we've said, okay, when's the right time to buy for you personally is when you're ready. So let's move to investors. So CO, what's the question from our investor partners in that around this? So let's change the topic up and say, okay, if you're looking to invest, when's the right time to buy?
Yeah, so a couple different angles on this from what I've heard from investors. One part, they're looking for opportunities, seeing that in times of distress where some owners are looking to sell. And for some investors, they're thinking that, especially since 2020, they're seeing that maybe there'll be an opportunity for developers as well to be able to buy at a discount. However, we've also seen, and this is also feedback from investors, is that prices have not slowed down. They've only shot through the roof throughout the year, and now they're wondering, are they too late? Or is this just a bubble that's going to come and go? They're not sure whether to go into it now or wait until some of these restrictions in different states ease down and things come back to a bit of normality before they buy. So that's kind of what I'm gauging from investors. But at the same time, they're always looking for opportunities. So when is the right time? Because they're looking for feedback and wanting to know when and where to buy. It gives me the indication that they are looking to buy at the moment and just simply looking for where are the best opportunities. So I'm getting a bit of a mixed bag there, Scotty.
Yeah, okay. All right. So let's delve into that somewhat. So if we're looking to buy for investment, then the answer is still going to be, well, it depends. It depends on what and where and for how long and what your situation is. So let's use a couple of examples right now. So, and I know what answer I'm going to get out of this. So Remo, is Melbourne a good spot to invest at the moment?
um, no. I can't say no. Look, I have spoken to a few agents in Melbourne over the last 2 or 3 weeks. There are some areas in Melbourne that are obviously growing substantially because a lot of people are moving sort of out of Melbourne into the outer skirts of Melbourne where they are not, I guess, restricted by the current, harsh restrictions that Melbourne's facing. So there are really high-performing suburbs that are growing. Would I personally invest in Melbourne right now? I probably wouldn't. And the only reason for that is I know that I can invest in another state, which is Queensland, that's had a substantial amount of people move there. There's an over-demand, undersupply. So I know, based on that the Queensland market's going to grow. So would I invest in Melbourne myself? No, I probably wouldn't. No.
All right. So, Karen, is Queensland a good spot to buy at the moment?
Yeah, well, yeah. Who wouldn't want to live here? It's 24 degrees today. The sun's shining, and we're walking around like almost normal people. So you can see the attraction of why I think 400,000 people have moved to Queensland in the last year.
I think I got those figures wrong. I think it was 45,000. That's
45,000. Yeah. It's a lot that have moved up here. And there's a lot, and there's still more coming. It's not letting them in at the moment. So that's an awful lot of houses to have free, which there weren't. So rentals just doesn't exist at the moment, any rental properties. So for investors, at least you're going to have good rent because there is no rentals around. For property owners, if you're buying as an investor, well, as long as you're not trying to flip the property, because there may not be any money in that because you are paying a high price at the moment. But the more people who keep coming, the more those prices are just going up and up over the next couple of years. So, yeah, Queensland's a great place. Who wouldn't want to live here?
That's funny. All right, so I'm going to expand on a couple of things that both Remo and Karen said there, and that I wouldn't rule out Melbourne. I wouldn't rule out Sydney. I wouldn't rule out any of them, and it all depends on for what we're talking about. As Karen aptly said, if you're going to be locked down, you might as well be locked down near the beach in the sun. So people are moving to Queensland, but because of that, and there's been a substantial number of people who have moved. As I said, 45,000 have moved to Queensland in the past 12 months. That's putting a massive strain on housing and rentals and other bits and pieces up here. But those people have come from somewhere. And what's that done to the markets where they've come from is perhaps softened them or dropped them, or maybe it hasn't. I don't know every market in every state, in every suburb of Australia. But you need to watch out for that because there's opportunities there. Because when things are opened up again, then we're going to see people are going to spend their way to happiness. And we know that these markets are going to move. And so Sydney is a very large market, so is Melbourne. But, Sydney is hugely resilient. It always has been. And it's the largest single property market in Australia if you consider the Sydney as itself as one market. And that has big potential. But the simple fact is that you still need to do your research, right? You need to know where the overall clock and the cycles are going and what the market's doing. And then you need to know what the local markets are doing if you're trying to time the market for a specific length of time. And that's what's super difficult to do, and you have to take a real punt at it. So, CEO, as our resident man on the ground in Melbourne, what's the feel in the Melbourne market and how's that going?
Yeah, so as you guys have mentioned, similar trend here in Melbourne where a lot of the homeowners who have the opportunity to move towards the coast around the Melbourne coastal areas, we've seen that trend happening here. But the feel in terms of what's happening here in Melbourne, it's slightly uncomfortable. doing things that are usually normal, like walking down the street. If you don't have a mask on, you'll feel a bit uncomfortable. If you're saying hi to a friend, you'll feel a bit uncomfortable. Maybe you're not doing the wrong thing, but it'll just feel like you're doing the wrong thing. With the current situation here. But yeah, from what you're sharing around property cycles, I'd love to hear what are the main components of the cycles. I'm sure a lot of the viewers would like to know about that as well. And how would they be able to identify what cycles they're in? Maybe that depends on where they're at. But yeah, would love to hear that from you, Scotty.
Yeah, okay. All right. So let's have a look at, now I'll try and share our screen here, see if I can get this right. Last time I did this, it didn't work too well. So, oh, look at this. It works today. All right. So that is the Phil Anderson clock. I don't think I can make it any bigger. It's about as big as I can get it on the one screen, and that's a 24-hour clock for the property cycle. So it's dated. It's probably hard to see. You can try and pinch it out if you're watching on Facebook and make your screen bigger, or just go really close with one eye and see if you can make it work that way. But they are dated all the way back from 2015. So we're sitting over here now in 2021 to 24. And that is the second stage of a two-stage cycle, so the second 12-hour period when you're looking at it on a clock face. All it means is that it is in full swing and it's completely driven by emotion and lavish government spending for public works. Gee, where have we heard that recently? That's all we're hearing about. You know, the government's going to spend our way back out of, you know, the corona event, and it's all through infrastructure and public spending. And that's a whole topic for another time, how you want to capture some of that privately, and your private purse capturing public spending is a topic for another day. But you'll hear about the world's tallest, you know, the world's biggest, the world's fanciest, all that sort of stuff happens at this stage in the cycle, whether it's announced and what have you. And that's the sort of stuff that we're seeing right now as we go along. So, mate, that is where that is at in terms of the overall property market cycle. Okay,
awesome. And how, in regards to investors, property owners right now, what can they be looking out for in terms of when to buy and how they can maximize their chances of getting better opportunities during these times?
Yeah, well, I mean, let's let someone else who researches property for every day. Karen, how about you want to answer that one?
What was your question again, CO? What would you want me to answer?
Yeah, so share from what Scotty's mentioned about the property cycles and where things are at now. What can investors and homeowners be able to? What are some of the indicators that they'd be able to look into for them to be able to identify better opportunities?
Yeah. Well, as Scotty said, at the moment, everything's in full swing. There's infrastructure spending in the billions coming out of our ears all over in Queensland there is. Everyone else is sort of locked down a bit at the moment, but that'll happen to get them all out. Look, for investors...
Oh. Looking very paused there, Karen.
Yeah, let's see if she comes.
For homeowners, it's a lot different sort of kettle of fish of what what you're looking for. Could be schools where you got work. That's a very different, list of items on your checklist to check off. So it's a very different thing for investors and homeowners. Investment's purely about making money, getting it rented or getting it developed, getting it resold. Whereas a homeowner is just purely your own personal choices, where you want to be, what personally fits in with you, whether it makes money or not. Well, that's, maybe living by the beach is not going to make you money because you paid too much, but it suits your lifestyle. So, but you may not invest there because it costs too much money.
Yeah, that's a good point. And look, we got another show later in the week, which is just on the property market update, CO. So that's going out for our Zenium show later in the week. But I will touch on this right now, and hopefully my share screen works again 2 times in one show. That'll be amazing. All right, so this is the current property clock now. Karen, I don't know if you've seen this month, but I have never, ever, ever seen the HTW report, monthly report, look like this. It is normally spread out around their figure, right? So they've got a clock. There's all these clocks, right? So their clock is peak of the market, bottom of the market, rising, falling, right? So you can see that on there. And normally there's things spread around the clock all round. I have never, ever, ever seen everything in a rising market or peak of the market, ever.
I'm surprised Melbourne isn't over than that segment.
Well, and this is right. And this is what I was talking about, why I asked CEO about what he feels on the ground versus what the data's telling us, because sometimes it's 2 different things. And this is proving that this is exactly this. So the data is actually saying that these areas in a rising market, well, that's everywhere. Everywhere is in a rising market, and away it goes. So that's pretty interesting, right? So everything is there. Now, how do you relate to that? And what does that mean? Well, we need to take a look at, say, our compass and go, okay, well, where do we want to act and what? So at the moment, everything here, so because we transpose, we take our pick a suburb and take it and transpose it on our compass to tell you what to do, right? So everything is sitting on this, well, when you look at the screen, the left-hand side of the screen. So you're looking at either cash flow or creating money in it or developing it or whatever. Everything is saying that that's what we should be doing right now, other than the stuff sitting at the top where we don't want to touch. We never touch the stuff at the top. But everything there is meaning we've got to go and be active in the property market if we want to make some money right now, which coincidentally is actually what we're doing, right? Because we follow this. We don't just talk about this. We follow this sort of stuff. And before I move on that, Karen, just relation to what we got here, we got this. I'll see if I can make this bigger. Sorry, guys. This is the Queensland government data for building approvals up to July. So you can see Queensland's up 9%, Australia's down almost the same amount, which of course doesn't align, right? So Australia's down a lot more than Queensland's up because Australia is the whole of the country. But you can see here, Queensland is up, everything else is down. So it's absolutely bring your gun and your cowboy hat and your spurs because it's Wild West in Queensland right now. And you might think that's great, but do you think you can find a block of land? Well, we'll let Karen answer that one, and we don't even need to have her answer because the answer is no, right? Because that's what she's been trying to do for us. We can't find blocks of land. And so this here is why, because these building approvals are up through the roof. So this is the sort of stuff that's going on. Now, where does that align with back on this? Well, we will see that a whole bunch of other activity happen at this stage in the cycle. So my point is, if it's not happening right now as much as, say, in other areas, it will happen, right? Because that's the stage of the cycle we're at. So we're going to be seeing still, and it's hard possibly to get our heads around, but we're going to be seeing pent-up demand in Sydney, Melbourne, even Perth is on a bit of a move, and those other sort of areas, because we're not seeing that demand realised just yet, okay? And we're in the stage of the property cycle where we should be seeing that action happen, and we're not. So just be mindful of that when you're looking at your plans. All right, so that's enough of me chewing everyone's ear off. So any final comments there, CO, Remo, or Karen?
No, it always, when we have a topic on when it's a good time to buy it, or I always cast my mind back to a couple of people I worked with, must be 14, 15 years ago. And the big question there was, should I buy a property now? Should I buy? What should I do? What should I do? Well, they never did. They still never have. And so, even if the market was a bit hot way back then, it was still a good time to buy looking back from now. And they're still renting. They still don't own properties. So, yeah.
I mean,
That's a
even
good
even
indication.
15 years ago, right? Even if
Yeah.
you overpaid for 500 grand, that property now would be worth what, 1.2 or something? Like,
Yeah.
that's just insane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Every time I see
so the
them back
question
at my
is,
old workplace, I'm like, oh, did you buy something? No, it's not the right time. Happy
Oh
renting.
dear, sad story. Remo?
I was just going to say, yeah. So I mean, if you can always connect the dots looking back, but you can never connect the dots looking forward, right? So what are we going to see in 15 years from now? Like, if the market is the market going to keep on doing what it's doing now and what it's done for the last 15 years? It has to, right? We can't go back to where it was. We can't even go back to where it was 5 years ago. So it's going to keep looking. So what, a property that was $500,000, which is now 1.2, 1.5, depending on where you are in Australia, what's that property going to look like in 15 years' time?
Yeah, well, I'm hoping that's a rhetorical question because I don't particularly sure I've got the actual answer for that. Unless I'm going to pass the CEO, I mean, he'll give us the answer on that for sure. But what I will say is that there's kind of an exponential growth curve based on the creation of money, right? I mean, this is where we're going to touch this more on later in the week because the RBA have come out with some announcements this week, which is just an official duck shove back to the government, and the RBA is going, oh, it was them, wasn't us at all, and so we'll cover that on Thursday's show. But the point being is that there's a whole bunch of infrastructure spending, which is exactly where we are at this point in the market, and there's money being come into the market, and it's got to come in and settle somewhere, and it settles in hard asset prices, and it's people always spend it on housing, and so that's going to go up. So yeah, you're right. I mean, coming out of GFC, would we think that what's the median house price in Sydney now? I think it's 1.2 or 1.3 or something. I think it's 1.3. Right? So would we have thought it was 1.3 back in 2008? I don't know. I mean, maybe, depending on where you were then. But we're talking about the median price here. We're not just talking about some, house on water. We're talking about, and I think Melbourne, CO, I saw the figures yesterday. I think they're sitting at it's either 950 or 980, I think is the median house price. I mean, I don't know when they let you into the country, but were you here in 2008? Would you have thought that was possible?
No. So I was here. Remo mentioned earlier. Some of you guys were fortunate to buy back in 1989. That's when I was born, so unfortunately I wasn't able to buy then. But I was in Australia in 2008, and no, I couldn't have imagined it hitting these prices. So So and based on what you've shared so far, something that caught my eye earlier, you mentioned easing up of cash flow. You're talking about one of your cycles, and at this phase, you didn't touch much on it, but with the increasing of I can't remember what it was, but we're in the phase of developments. Is that right? And that's because of the demand. Maybe you can touch on that just to wrap up.
Yeah, okay, all right. So let's chuck that back on the screen while I'm finding that. I mean, out of all the people here on the screen today, Remo's done the best of us out of property because, I mean, he would have bought back in the late 50s when he was like in his 20s. So that's, he's had that property for ages. Yeah, as you can see. How's that? Mate, did you get your crates of the beard colouring stuff? Did you have time to do that before the show, or is that boot polish? All right, so we're looking back here. We're looking back here on the compass. So, CO, what you're talking about was, okay, let's go over this quickly again. So this is the HTW. This is not our stuff, right? This is independent data. Herod Todd White valuation firm, one of, if not the largest in Australia. They compile their data, and the report is awesome. If you love this sort of stuff, you'll love reading it. If you don't love this sort of stuff, it'll put you to sleep, so you should read it anyway. It'll help you with, narcolepsy and stuff like that. But the point being is that they compile this data, and it comes on the screen, as you can see, and everything here is sitting on the left, which is what they're saying is either starter recovery, rising market, that's the majority of them, which is that 9 o'clock position, or approaching peak of the market. We won't worry about this stuff up here. That's Canberra, peak of the market. Well, Canberra's always peaking about something. And so that's here. So what we do is our compass has the smarts where we take the same position on here. So if we're looking at a 9 o'clock position on a suburb, let's call it, Lismore or Mackay or Sunshine Coast or whatever, and then you overlay it on our compass. And so see there, it says rising market and it says rising market over here. See that aligns? And so that's the stage here that we're looking to create value in property, right? So create property, create value, all that sort of stuff. So you can do renos, developments, splitters. You can buy and hold in this time. That's okay. This is a time where it kind of really supercharges the values in the property, more so when you're active on it. Okay, so you can just buy and hold, but you do a lot better if you're doing something active on it too. So that's what the stage is at now. Is that explained enough, Sia? I mean, because it's kind of hard.
So we can see the benefits as to why we should move into more active strategies, being a rising market. As it leans towards a tightening in credit that you've got up there, what's the advantage of, or why should people be looking at active strategies like developments in this phase?
Well, so when we do our development, we look at, so there's little inner rings here, which might be hard. I'll see if I can make this a bit bigger. So there's these inner rings. So there's your actions, so to speak. Like that's kind of what you do, like snatch and grab at a discount and all this sort of stuff. And this is the creating. But there's these little tiny little inner rings here, which is like at the, what's that, the 10:30, 11 o'clock time, we want to be out of the market. Okay, so everyone is probably still piling into the market and we want to be getting out. And it's the same over here. When markets start to crash, what's the first thing that people do? Oh, they start getting out. Oh, that's crap. Let's get my money out. And what that does is that pushes the market pricing right down. So we think it's a good time to get in and snatch and grab a discount. Okay, but we're out of the market on that top. That's the ultimate goal. Unless you're buying and holding, right, which is fine. But if we're transacting, we're active, then we're looking to be out by the 10:30, 11 o'clock in our suburb cycle, right? And that's completely different to the overall property cycle because then we judge that on years, not so much suburb actions. And so by years, we're looking to be out by end of 2025, right, in our transactions, on some of our transactions if they're active. But that, once again, that's a completely different thing.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott. That answers it for me. And I trust this will be of a lot of value for the viewers out there, looking at what part of the cycles they're in at the moment, what kind of opportunities are available, or should they be looking at during these times. So it seems like, based on what I've seen there on the compass, you want to be looking at more active strategies during this phase. And I think you, as you mentioned, leaning towards 2025, where you want to be looking at exit strategies from the active strategies, right?
Yeah, or balancing your strategies, and we've got a whole range of strategies around that for clients. So we can take them through active strategies when the market's right, and then we've got, I guess, more passive strategies, if you want to talk them like that, to hold us over, which is really cash flow strategies in those rougher times, and then which then enables us to keep our capital safe to go and snatch and grab at discounts in those times that we can go and do that as well. As you can see, so if we're on a rising market now, we're going to come to a large crash at the end of the 2020s. Well, then we're going to want cash flow in our lives, right? Let's just say our collective lives, we're going to want cash flow through that time. And we're also going to want our capital preserved because, 18 months or so into that time, we're going to go in and I'm going to be knocking on all our clients' door and saying, we got that capital because now's the time to utilize it, to execute on it, because we're going to go and make some serious coin over the next 4 years in this market. So it's all about being aware of that. But that's really, really having your finger on the pulse. And if you're comfortable to do that by yourself, then go do it. Or you're probably better off working with a team like our team, who this is what we do for a living, and this is how we help our clients.
Awesome. And for anyone that views this and wants to get in touch, what's the best way to get in touch, Scott?
Yeah, well, if you're watching this on the Property Realm page, of course, you can hit us up on there, which is our Facebook group. We talk about all things to do with exactly this: discounted buying, positive cash flow, development, all that sort of stuff, construction. or you can also just call us directly, 1300 66 7789. Or you can visit our business website, which is propertyadvice.com.au. There you go. That's the sales pitch part, CO.
Or you can call Scott directly on 04.
That's right. That's right.
5.
Awesome.
Oh, joking.
Yeah.
It
Awesome,
won't
guys.
matter, mate. I don't answer the calls as it is. So, like,
I know.
it'd just be more people calling me. I don't know who that number is, but they'll leave me a message if they want me.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Rumo. Thanks, Karen.
Thank you.
Look forward to sharing more with the viewers. And guys, if you have any questions, feel free to drop it in the comments. We'll be back next Tuesday, same time, with more info and updates regarding property and talking about that soon. So until then, we'll catch you next week. Take care. Bye
All
for
right.
now.
See you guys.
Bye.
See you, CO.
Bye.
Bye.